Good afternoon, Senate Institutions is Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024. Hoping everybody stays safe during this impending storm that we have coming. We're gonna spend some time with the folks from BTS. We have the commissioner in with us today. Always an honor to have her in with Joasia and Kate. And we're gonna talk about some of these projects that might have got nicked or might have got delayed or maybe not. We're gonna just talk about a lot of projects here that concern BTS. As far as these folks you might be listening, the capital bill had third reading in the House today and it passed. Sounds like it passed almost unanimously, so that means that we'll be getting that bill fairly shortly, and so we're working off some of the things that we kind of know that haven't changed. So on we go. So who would like to sit in the hot seat today?
Mr. Chairman, I'll start. You never know. Joe and I might do
Good shit.
little do-si-do
Oh,
with each other.
And also we have Scott Moore in here today too as well. Sorry, Scott. I'm sorry not to get you exclude you as well.
Hard to find it.
I get that.
So, Mr. Chairman, for the record, my name is Jennifer Fitch and I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Buildings and General Services. And you introduce them, but I will let them introduce themselves with their titles. Joe?
Good afternoon. I'm Joe Ager, the Director for Design and Construction with Buildings and General Services.
Good afternoon, my name is Kate Everly, I'm the Director of Communications and Legislative Affairs.
So, Mr. Chairman, would you like us to go through the line items where changes have been made to the original governor's recommend?
I think probably, what do you feel most comfortable with?
Well, the things that have remained the same, we would support, continue to support, right, because it was so just to step back, as I'm sure you all know, the way the capital bill development works, but it's helpful in the context of this conversation, is that in the fall, they released something around beginning of September, and they asked for people to submit capital bill requests. And so all agencies and departments, and actually branches, because judicial branch can do it, so can the legislative branch, then puts together their capital bill request. And then that capital bill request then gets submitted to finance and management. And finance and management, working with the agency of administration, so Sean Brown and Tristan Klauser, work together to put together the capital bill, and that comes out as the governor's recommended capital bill. So by the time it gets released to the legislature, what you'll often see when you compare what has been submitted versus what's in the capital bill, you'll see differences, right? Some projects may be supported, some projects may not. They may reduce the amount of money that's being recommended in the governor's recommend. But that's what you see before you, and I'm working off of Scott's wonderful spreadsheet, so thank you. And specifically, if you have it, it looks like you all do, so this will make it easy. So really what we want to do is we want to look at kind of that darker gray color, kind of in the middle columns there, H, I, and J, and compare those to K, L, and M. So unless there are questions on other line items that did not change from the governor's recommend, I will just stick with the items that have changed.
That sounds good.
So the first one is statewide major maintenance. We talk about this one a lot. This line item is really important to BGS. This is how we address all deferred maintenance in our buildings. Deferred maintenance means it's already past due for replacement. As you'll see, we requested 8.5 million and the House increased that to 8.7 million. 100,000, typically what happens in HCI is if there's any money left on the bottom line, they typically put it into major maintenance. So that's why you often see that changes and usually it's an up in the major maintenance line item. So, but $100,000 of this line item is specifically for the legislature. And it was put into this line item because they would like to replace the chairs that were lost to the flood, that the chairs were in the cafeteria. There was concern from the legislature that if you had a specific line item, that it might jeopardize FEMA funding. As a little bit of education, this was contents lost inventory. So what happens is that all of us that had contents that were lost, so shake the buildings upside down, what falls out, right? Furniture is certainly one of those things. We're all going through that process right now of recording everything that was lost in the flood. We are done, except for the curator's office. We're still working with David Sheets. He had a lot of items in storage in 109. And it's hard to remember all of it because it was pretty jam-packed. And so that process is just taking a little bit longer. But there was a concern that if there was a specific line item in the capital bill that you might jeopardize FEMA funding. That is not true. So if you wanted to, potentially be a little bit more transparent about the line item, you may decide that you either want to add some language into major maintenance that says $100,000 of that is to go to cafeteria, chairs and tables, or my preference would be that this would be a line item for the legislature. And the only reason I say that is because sometimes BGS gets put in a position where we're really buying on behalf of other branches, but it also means that we have to work it into our workflow. And so it's just another place where we could trip up, right? Meaning, you know, we get hit with another flood or some other catastrophic event occurs and we're off chasing that and we forget to chase the chairs and then we look like we're not being responsive. So I would say that, again, either something that clarifies it underneath the major maintenance line item or its own line item going to legislature.
What does it mean going to the legislature?
Do you have had line items in the past? A good example of that is 2 Aiken. And it means just like BGS has their own section, you
So
have
we would
your
have
own
a
section. That's right.
And who would typically administer and use the purchasing power of that fund to buy the chairs? Would it be the
Sergeant
Sergeant
at Arms.
Arms? Okay.
That's correct.
So committee, what do you think about that? I like the transparency of that and putting that out there, especially the commissioner says it's not in violation of anything.
It's not.
I would, how does everybody feel about that?
Why do we call it Sergeant of Arms? Why would we blame the legislature if she's the one?
She just typically buys on your behalf. So when we do have line items in the capital, it's just kind of like when you say in a different section, BGS is receiving the funds and will oversee the project on behalf of.
Okay.
When you have your own line item, you typically put that same language in the Sergeant of Arms.
That's purple.
Everybody good with that?
Great.
Yeah, so we'll do that.
That just provides a little bit greater transparency there.
So did I need section 1 or something, or what, like, why is this?
So you would have to create a section, because you don't, I don't.
And Scott will do that for us, right, Scott?
I could, for the record, Scott Moore, Joint Fiscal Office, I'm happy to create a line item on there on the spreadsheet to show that, and then we can work with Danny as to what the appropriate language would be for that. But, yeah.
Okay. Well, congratulations, guys. We made our first decision on capital bill, so there you go.
So we would,
So,
I'm sorry,
no,
we would subtract 100K from that 8.7.
That's correct.
and so additional monies are on that, Commissioner. Those additional monies were, and maybe at some point in time you're gonna capture that, but was this just some monies that they found additionally floating around in
It
the
was
bills
just
and
an added
projects?
little extra money on the bottom line, and as I said, they usually will put it in major maintenance and we will spend it. And you're gonna see that we're gonna be increasing our major maintenance request over time. Simply because things are becoming more expensive and our buildings are aging, right? So there's even more things that we need to replace over time. So anytime you add a little bit more money in there, we will spend it.
Okay, so you have places you can put that?
Oh, we absolutely.
Okay,
have
I
this.
just wanted to check with you. Want to be
Absolutely.
sure about that.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, Scott.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yep.
There were a couple of instances where the governor's recommend had some odd numbers
Yeah,
in that they weren't specifically round, and the House Committee had trimmed them to make them rounder. So I think that some of those extra dollars were, instead of having $562,025, they made it $550,000 and then rolled that extra money out to major maintenance.
now this committee, I might not know that, but they stole that idea from our Senator, Dick Mazza. And, he was the artist that created all of that. He would always round up and he would do that, so. I
I'm
think
curious as to some of the source of that, that's what some of that is.
sounds good. Okay, on the go.
The next item was a fairly significant reduction in the Middlesex Therapeutic Community Residence Master Plan. So if we go back in the time back machine about a year ago, we built the new Essex Mental Health Care Facility and we moved the residents from, and what we call TCR for short, in Middlesex up to the new Essex Mental Health Care Facility. This money was intended to do a couple of things. We need to do some master planning because in addition to eventually decommissioning the modular units that are there, we also have a vacant police barracks. It does have a radio shop in it today. But we need to find another home for it. So that's one of the challenges that we have with that site. We also have a vacant building that's very old and not very efficient. So what are we gonna do with that building? Once we remove the modular units, you have a lot more space there. And then finally, you've got Basara, which is Vital Records under the Secretary of State, and you've got Print and Postal. They're both in they're kind of independent buildings, but they have a joint area that you walk into for access. That is problematic because the archives really needs their own separate discrete space and should not be in any way connected to print and postal. In addition to those buildings also need some love where Visara print postal is. So there's a lot of, we really want to take a good look at the site. What is the highest and best use? How would we achieve that and go through that whole planning process? And then the other kind of portion of the money was to decommission those modular units. Those modular units will likely be used now for another 2 to 3 years because we have done minor fit up and we are putting justice involved youth there on a temporary basis. Until we can build them a new permanent facility.
So the justice involved youth is, remind us, because there's so many things that are going, so many projects that are going on. Were these the youth that would originally have been in Woodside? Or is this not to that level?
So it's a really great question for the Department of Children's and Families, because based on an earlier conversation today, there may have been some different reasons why you went to Woodside, but the modular units are specifically being used or will be used or have been fit up for justice involved youth.
Okay. So the $350,000 the government recommended at first was gonna be to clean that site up, basically to remove those. But now the $50,000 is gonna allow you guys to fit them a little bit further so that you can use them, as you said.
So this is separate and distinct. We used, actually DCF paid for the minor fit up that we did. This money is really used for doing that master planning. So looking at all the different challenges on the site, like I said, empty police barracks still has a radio shop, where does the radio
Okay.
shop go? What do I do with that space, right? If I decide to raise that building, or if we decide to put somebody else in it, it's definitely gonna need some fit up. What are we gonna do in the area once we decommission the trailers? What are we gonna put there? And then that larger building where we have to really figure out how we're gonna create those separate distinct spaces as well. So it's a site we're gonna keep, but we also wanna use it for its highest and best use. One of the things that we have been looking at is the Department of Liquor and Lottery is looking to build a new liquor warehouse and office building. They traditionally have been in 11 and 13 Green Mountain Drive, kind of at the end. But the liquor warehouse is really antiquated at this point, and the Department of Liquor and Lottery grew. So it was the Department of Liquor and the Department of Lottery separate, then they got combined. And now they wanna have all of their staff co-located into one building together. 13 Green Mountain Drive, which used to house the Department of Liquor, is too small to bring in all the staff from Liquor and Lottery. So they have now moved into lease space in Berlin while they still have the warehouse. So, and one of the needs we have, and we believe the site would be really good for it, because it's centrally located in central Vermont, right on the interstate, would be to potentially look at putting a co-located office building for Liquor and Lottery, as well as a new modernized warehouse as well.
So just the justice involved youth, Mr. Chair, I just wanna go back, cause we had folks in those modular.
We did, we had the mental health care patients that were underneath the jurisdiction of the Department of Mental Health. The justice involved youth is under the jurisdiction of the Department of Children's and Families, so different
Okay.
population.
Are these the folks, do you remember we had the woman testify? And about how they were being, staff was being hurt because they had no place.
So they're bringing,
Is that, I mean, I know I'm not, I
that
don't
is,
remember the name.
there is
You know, we're
no,
gonna ask you a lot of questions on this because we're gonna have to report it and we're gonna get 138,000 questions on the floor about this. So my committee is going to be very, very clear on this so that whoever reports this section will know, and the chair needs to know as well.
so there is no in-state facility at this point that can house justice involved youth. I'm sure you've read it in the newspapers, right? Where unfortunately, every once in a while, because there is no other option, you know, they have housed them for a short period of time in a correctional facility. That is not what they want to do, but they don't have an in-state facility. So where else are they going to send them? And so recognizing that we had some empty modular units, last summer we looked at a bunch of different solutions for a temporary.
St. Albans, right? Was
We
that what
looked at
the
St. Albans, we looked at
Okay.
Windsor, we looked all over the place, you name it, we looked at it. And ultimately what we picked was the empty modular units. And then it, again, like I said, we did very minor fit up in that facility. And so at this point, it is ready for it to be occupied. In terms of the staffing piece, DCF is hiring a service provider to provide services to that population of justice involved youth. I believe at this point, they're in contract negotiations, or they've just recently completed those contract negotiations. So it will not be DCF employees that will be providing the services inside the facility to the justice involved.
So they have to wait for that before using the facility?
That's right, and my understanding is the plan is early this summer, that they, right now, as the plan stands, they're going to start using that facility early summer.
That's a while.
So Scott and Linda, because we're gonna get outside the scope of what the commissioner knows what DCF is going and how it's gonna be operated. I wanna be able to get those folks in here because again, we're not in here to talk about what their policy is. We're just here to, as this is gonna get explained on the floor, I wanna be very, very clear that we have some answers about when, how, what, how many people, all of that stuff. And committee, remember that we don't really have a say in that matter, but I just wanna be able to make sure that you know what's going on in there because these are exactly the type of questions that get asked on the floor that do not involve us other than the building in itself, but these are the ones that trip you up and get you humming. And you don't know what's going on, and so we need to have some knowledge about what's gonna go on in there. Again, so we'll get DCF in here and we'll ask those questions.
Thank
You guys good with that?
Yeah.
And so the reduction in the reason why I told you all that story was because we were not anticipating at the time that we would be reusing those modular units when we requested the funding, right, to do both the master planning and the decommissioning of those modular units. It has since been reduced and we were asked to, provide some feedback on that. Here's what I would say, which is what you're gonna hear on all the line items that got reduced. It's fine to reduce some of these, right? We were asked in the House, we responded to that. Alice talks a lot, our chair Emmons always asks us about spending profile, right? What can you spend in the next year? If I do a haircut here, is that gonna slow you down? Joe always answers those questions honestly. Sometimes he doesn't know because we're in planning and programming, and we're not far enough along to tell people, because we're not at that point of knowing the answer. And sometimes Joe knows, hey, we're only gonna be able to spend this amount of money in FY 25. What I would say though, for any reduction in the capital bill, we will need that money at some point. It's not to say that we don't need the money, it's just a matter of when we receive the money. So we will need this full appropriation at some point. It did get slowed down. And we know there's gonna be more pressure in future capital bills, right? Because we've got women's correctional reentry, we're gonna be looking at forensics. There's a variety of facilities, larger facilities on the horizon, plus potentially match for flood recovery here in the complex. So anything we kick down the road will create more future pressure at a time that we already know there's going to be, or we can anticipate greater pressure just based on what we know in terms of what's in the queue. So that will be my response on all of these that were reduced.
But the planning of the $50,000 that is there is gonna be just planned on planning and what you had talked about, and future plans to make maybe possibly a larger facility, and a warehouse for liquor and lottery.
Right, and with that reduction though, it's not like we'd have the opportunity then to relocate the public safety radio room and start demolition of the building that's sitting there idle right now.
Okay.
So,
We're kind of in a Windsor situation in Middlesex,
Right.
and this is a site we do wanna hold on to, and we do wanna keep using. So my point is that if you slow us down, to Joe's point, we can't relocate, we can't start working on that plan, because we don't have enough money to do so.
So let me ask it in a different way then. If we were to restore funding on that, is that a project that you could get to this year?
I believe so. I mean, we've already done one of the planning. The next step is really working with public safety on what to do with their radio room, because right now it still has a generator and everything else, it's heated. Can that be removed? If so, where does it go? It may have to stay on the property and then we gotta work out something else. But there's also demolition of the building. The whole reason why public safety moved out and we fit up the old Berlin Library for public safety to move into was the condition of that building. They really, one, they were outgrowing it, but mainly because it really wasn't worth renovating for them to continue to use as a public safety facility. And for that matter, anything else. It was built in the 60s
As
as a schoolhouse. And, I'm not sure if, ever since I've been here, it's been public safety. I don't know if anybody had a short-term stint in there prior to that or not.
And it's a radio room that's being actively used today by public safety.
Correct. In that room,
Automated.
that room is like a third the size of this one, compared to the size of the rest of the building.
Is there an antenna there?
There's some small antennas. There's no longer the microwave. The
Okay.
microwave use stopped years ago.
Okay,
It's not dispatch, right?
It is not dispatch. Only dispatch now is in Westminster and Williston. Those are the peak staff locations.
okay, so committee, that again, that is gonna be a mouthful on the floor, so whenever we get to there and whoever gets there. And, you know, as we go down through the bill and see if we got any money left and all that, that's just a mouthful of stuff that's gonna get a lot of questions. And we're gonna wanna make sure that we really understand what's going on there.
Okay.
That's something we don't wanna get tripped up on, so your notes are gonna be as far as, what's going on there, and we'll get DCF in there and talk about what their role's gonna be.
The next line item is David Sheets's line item, or that's what I like to call it, which is for State House replacement of historic interior finishes.
Yep.
We requested $50,000. It was reduced down to 0. This particular line item, when we look at Mr. David Sheets, he has many years of funding that he has not spent. So I would say that this is something, we need to motivate him to spend this money. We're also helping him because we are assigning a project manager within BGS to work with him. But we've been asking him to put together a plan to spend this money. I can tell you that I've been asking for 3 years. And we haven't been spending our money. So what I'd like to do is set David up for success by reducing this line, and we're keeping it the way that it is in the capital bill as proposed through HCI, because I need David to start spending his money. And we need to figure out how we do that efficiently. And I'd like to do that when it's still manageable. If we keep adding money to it, we're sort of compounding. And I really want to plan.
Good.
So that's something that you can be okay with.
There's lots of places, yes. Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, there's lots of places that I've been hearing now for several years. that
So
needs to-
the wording on something like that would be is that the $50,000 is not something that's useful. There's already funds to be expended there and they haven't been expended yet. And so, we use that money elsewhere.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. You
How
know,
much does he have?
Joe would know better than I do.
150, 200,000. But for past prior years, it is not.
That's okay.
So it stays in an account?
Yes, it does.
Technically, after 2 years, you can do what we call the repro committee, and you can take it back.
Okay,
Everybody's been really good because we love David, and his intent is amazing.
so we
wanna.
just leave it.
We wanna maintain carpets and drapes.
Oh, yeah,
all
totally.
the things in the State House, right?
Yeah,
The State House needs some love, so, but I wanna get him to a point where we have a plan, we have a project manager that's with him, and he's starting to effectively and efficiently spend his money.
Okay, so if he has 150,000.
I think, yeah, we can give you that.
Well, and he can actually get better deals too, if he buys more stuff in bulk.
And I will tell you, there was a little carpet patch that we did in the guard room. I had to ask for that for 3 years in a row, so it was,
Part of the problem is that this is not your average everyday carpet.
yes,
Yeah, yeah,
it's true.
This is
Yeah.
a broadloom that is manufactured in England. And so one of the issues of doing a patch up in the card room instead of replacing it was the fact that it has not arrived from England yet. And I don't know if it has. maybe.
I know, I haven't heard that it's arrived from England yet either.
So
So we
that
might wanna.
would get changed out this summer, once you go home, that would be done if it was actually landed here.
I think the other complicating issue is that, and this is tough, because David's really busy, right, during legislative session. You have to line all these projects up so that when you leave in May or June, we're ready to go. And what happens is that we get to a point where now we're out of session, we don't have enough time before you're back in session again for us to do the work. So you really have to back it up in terms of when you're actually putting out that RFP or bringing in services. So we're gonna get there and we're gonna set up David for success. But I want it to be manageable and I want us to kind of get into our rhythm.
Sounds reasonable.
The next one is, we go down here, R22.
Can we
Oh,
just,
sorry,
can we go back? No.
Sure.
No, it didn't change. I just, can we go to the, line 11, St. Albans, Northern State Correctional Facility? It was different than Act 69, and it didn't change at all. What did the governor do different on that one right there?
I'm gonna defer to Joe on this one.
There was the issues that, this project right now it's a roofing job that's out to bid right now, and it's just a matter of needing the additional funds during the design process from when we got this original funding. And also, the things have changed that we had to incorporate into the design, and then there's also basically it's just the issue with manpower and labor rates going up to cover that additional expense.
Okay, this should be nothing that's of a problem because I probably, it's really nothing that's changed much, so, we'll have to make a decision on whether we're gonna show FY 24 on that or FY 25. We can easily explain what the $400,000 is and all of that stuff, so we'll have to make a decision at some point in time about how deep we'll go into what we did last year versus what we did this year, because the governor put it in this year, it wasn't in there last year. So we'll make that decision as we go to report it.
And cost overruns happen, right? Supply chain right now is really difficult. We talked about inflation.
And that's why that's
right.
Well, good, on we go.
So the next one is statewide refrigerant R 22. So R 22, as we testified before, is being phased out. In fact, you can't get any new R 22. The only thing you can get now is what they call recycled R 22. We have a lot of systems that still have R 22 in them. And in this biennium, we requested money to start to basically do a planning process and to start to phase out R 22, which means we actually have to replace equipment to do so, right? Because the equipment runs on R 22. This one has been reduced. One of the things about flood recovery and sale of 108 Cherry, which were not anticipated at the time that we did our request 2 years ago, is that as a result of the flood and the sale of 108, magically, we have less equipment with R22 in it.
Hmm.
So that is one of the reasons why this line item has been reduced. Joe, is there anything you want to add to that?
It's along with that, I do the flood, and as you said, we want to wait. There's also, beginning of the year, the EPA has also banned 3 additional refrigerants that are out there. 410A is one that we have a lot of. So we also now have to go back out and do another assessment to find out exactly what's out there. For our systems that may have that, and this money would then go to that also. But I'm not gonna be able to change that out as fast until I get this survey done.
Are we hearing that you're fine with that?
I'm fine with
I'm
that,
going to Joe.
Okay,
yes.
So you probably need to just keep a refrigerant phase out, just
For a while.
not just R 22.
Yeah, I was.
Correct. The R 22, I mean, that was a big one in the past, and like with units we had here in the complex that were on R 22, we actually had a contractor capture that. And so
To recycle.
we're hanging on to it so that we can reuse it where we need to keep things. The problem with it is when the system fails beyond a simple repair, because as you change out to the newer refrigerants, the pressure increases substantially. The existing piping and everything else cannot handle that low pressure system as like R 22 has. So you're ended up replacing the whole thing. But again, you know, some, as the commissioner said, we'll head of the curve compliments of the flood. And so, like,
Because the other thing that we do is when we're removing equipment that has R 22 in it, we're harvesting it.
Right.
So that we have some on hand if we need it in another location.
Yeah,
So we're trying to be very strategic about that.
everybody good with that?
yeah.
Okay,
Art and state buildings, so last year, in last year's capital bill, there was language that basically the way the art and state buildings program used to run is we would work together. With the Arts Council and with David Sheets, the state curator, and we would identify a project and they would take $50,000 from that project to do the art and state buildings program. It wasn't anything that we anticipate when we're putting together project estimates, because we never know which project is gonna be picked for the art and state buildings program. That has created some tension, right, between project managers who have limited dollars, right, and working with this program. So last year, there was a proposal that was supported by the Arts Council to have their own line item, you all supported it, have its own line item and to go from $50,000 to $75,000. As part of the language, the BGS commissioner is required to put in a capital bill request. Would have changed that had I known that, because I think it should come from them. But in any case, so in the fall, and we put in $75,000 request as we are told to do in session law. It was not supported, when they put the capital bill together, it was not supported by the administration, but here's why. And that is, they only were trying to support existing projects in FY 25. I mean, Sean should speak to that, but that was the goal. This is considered new, right? Because in theory, we had to add a new line item and they consider it to be a new project. That's why it was not supported by the administration. Ultimately, the House elected to put $75,000 back into the capital bill for the Arts and State Buildings Program,
Which complies with the new statute.
which complies with the state.
And then who does that? You guys? I mean, who's making those decisions as far as, because I certainly got a lot of pressure on that early, a lot of emails when we first got the capital bill, or saw it, first saw it, so
So
I
the,
can't remember who was emailing me.
the Arts Council is the one that oversees the program, and then once the art is installed, it then becomes part of the curator's collection or the state art collection. And so then it comes into our jurisdiction, and then we are responsible for maintaining it and taking care of it.
And I think there's a committee that.
There is,
Well, I know I'm on some of that committee as far as with the Arts in the State House.
that's right, and we
Yeah.
redid the guidelines,
Right.
over the summer and fall, it was very collaborative with the Arts Council. Because, and Joe can speak to this. There's not only the art, but there's installing the art, and depending on what the installation is, it can get very costly, right? Depending on if they need some kind of, foundation, or they need some kind of anchoring system, and so. The guidelines are still a little bit gray in that place in the guidelines, but. We did put in some language to say if it's overly, because what happens is that they only have $75,000 that goes to the art. So any type of installation that's required, anchoring, whatever it may be, that is borne on the cost on the project itself. And then so I keep testifying to our projects are pretty thin in terms of funding, so we don't have a lot of flex in there. So we need to make sure it's reasonable so the project can still pay for the installation.
So historical knowledge. Historically, what would they usually get? They,
They used to get $50,000.
like for the 2-year period, or $50,000 for each year for 100,000 total?
Each year, $100,000 total.
Okay, so now they basically got a base raise to 150,000.
That is correct. And then so what happens is that the BGS commissioner and the curator meets with the head of the Arts Council. We go through whatever line items you have approved for that fiscal year. And then we talk about potential good candidates for citing of art. Ultimately, the Arts Council, I think it goes to committee. Actually, I know it does. We get an email and they say, here's what we'd like to do. The committee all says yay or nay. Usually it's always yes, at least the ones I've been on. And then a smaller committee is then formed from there, and you could probably speak more to where it goes from there.
Once the building is selected, then it's the project manager and the people who are going to be in the building, whether it's new or existing building, and they form that committee and they go in. That's when the artists are brought in and they're actually then presented, and that committee then selects what art will be going into or around that building.
And this is encompasses all BGS buildings?
Yeah.
It is limited, they just increased it to correctional facilities.
Yeah, we had
All state
correctional
office
on that.
buildings, now correctional facilities are involved.
And a hatchery, a fish
The
place.
hatcheries are,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. the travel.
not sure,
Yeah.
courthouses are, so I'm not sure now the addition of correctional facilities, everything may be in. Because it's included in mental health, Berlin has it. Essex also received art and state building, so we could be now all, or, yeah, so I think
Asa Bloomer is gonna get
maybe
in
everything
our
now has-
installation, cause I felt like we've been putting a little bit of money into that building ever since we got rid of ever since the contract we had for property management services expired and we kind of took a more active role in the building. It's gotten money through the capital bill and we've been investing in that building, but it hasn't been a huge renovation. And last year I said, if there's one building in our portfolio that could really use art, it's the Asa Bloomer building. So we will be putting some art into that building.
How much of it is in this building versus everywhere else?
Money actually has been saved for this building, as well as the Supreme Court, because we were supposed to be doing larger projects in here, but I don't know where Michelle is with the Arts Council.
I do not know that.
I think she's been like kind of stocking money aside. That's what
And I
I.
thought the Friends of the State House did the art here.
There's another separate program where they
Yeah.
also raise money to do portraits and different
More than
things
one.
like that, other art types of
Okay.
installations. David has many different groups and he works with. That's why it's busy, that's what I'm saying. So the next one is Windsor. Oh, sorry.
No. I know the answer to this, but I just have to have you say it. that would cause probably more heartburn than what it's worth even considering moving that $75,000.
Here's what I would say, Mr. Chairman, it wasn't in the governor's recommend, and we support the governor's recommend.
Thank you.
Yeah, and our committee
Oh, we look at,
brought forth that bill last year.
but sometimes we just have to hear the words, right?
Yeah.
Yes. He's always support the governor's recommend, Mr. Chair. So where was I? Oh, here we go.
Windsor.
So Windsor, this one's a funky one, and it might actually be a little bit easier for Joe, but I'll at least set the stage, which is this. We have the Windsor, what was the former Windsor Correctional Facility. We've had different populations in that facility over time. We had men, we had women, we had men. At some point, the fee for space rate was very high, and it just became untenable in terms of being cost effective for corrections. So they made a recommendation that they close that facility, which was subsequently supported by the legislature, I think around the 2018 timeframe. Since then, obviously, they vacated the site, and they moved all the residents to other facilities. And it's just been sitting there vacant. It costs the state $250,000 a year. Just to basically have it there. We still have to heat some of the buildings, for example. And so we have looked at it on a few occasions when we've had situations where we need a space solution. So for example, we did look at it for a DCF or a temporary juvenile facility, because it's there. As we understand it, part of the reason why the site is not being utilized is because the town of Windsor does not want another correctional facility or another agency of human services facility. But, and I know you heard this, but when they did the most recent study through the RPC, what they found was it's a mixed emotion. Some people are fine having a HS facility there. Some people are not. It's about 50-50 kind of split in the community. So, but we also know the town manager is an avid no from it being repurposed again for the Agency of Human Services. So it's been sitting there. I think we've done 3 studies on the property. VGS has asked to sell twice. It has not been supported by the legislature. And so it's just kind of sitting there. At the same time, I can also tell you that people have brought forward proposals to the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. Every single time someone brings a proposal, it gets thoroughly vetted. The thing that has held up moving forward with any of those proposals is that the developers that are coming forward have great ideas, great uses of the site, but they don't have all the funding necessary. And so they usually come saying, we would love it if the state of Vermont would partner with us and help us provide some funds for development. And unfortunately, we don't have the funds to do so. So it continues to sit there. We could ask to sell it again, but again, we haven't gotten approval to do so. And we have been continued to ask to study it. My understanding of this line item is that there was $400,000. It was slightly reduced down to $378,000. They added $100,000 to it this year. And they would like us to demolish or prepare some buildings for demolition. To be honest with you, I'm not sure if that will make the site any more attractive. So we keep talking about if we're gonna do anything with the site, we really need to start thinking, if we're gonna sell it, thinking about development. And what steps will we take to make that site more attractive to somebody? And HCI felt that would mean that we would take down a couple of buildings to start that process.
To be fair, this committee has had some brief discussions about that. And I don't know that we've made a complete decision on it yet. We haven't really had enough time to really sit right down and say yes or no, but we might have some designs for that $478,180 within the capital bill and other areas. We'll know more about it as we start going down through and get into all the areas of need. But if we didn't leave any money in that section, does that impact BGS in any way?
Look to Joe on that.
Thank you for putting me on the spot.
Well,
So a little history on that is once it was vacated, sat for a few years, then we were looking at possibly getting an Agency of Natural Resources out of lease space in Springfield and moving some of their the boats and canoes and whatnot up into there. The feedback was they really didn't like the 3 rows of razor ribbon on the fence and the likes of that. So in FY22, we were given $400,000. And
to start removing
To
the
start-
razor wire.
Right, and then what also happened with that, also we, DCF came along and we quickly looked at it for DCF moving in there for a short period. We quickly did, a couple of hand scratches on that to see whether or not they could fit and the likes of that. And we've looked at, I think, for a few others, and during that time, it's like, okay, the fencing can stay. But, some of the buildings are not a problem. And so we used, well, it's at $378,180 is the fact that we used some of that money to do an assessment of asbestos. So we now know how much asbestos is in each of our buildings. So if we were to tear one down, we would know if we had to abate it or not. And that's where we're at the point. But as the commissioner says, with only $478,000, the buildings that we looked at do have either potentially high levels of lead paint, which can be accommodated if you mix your debris and it all goes whole bulk to landfill. But the asbestos still has to be abated in advance. So I don't think we would, the buildings that we're looking to tear down because they're, our opinion, my opinion is that you're not gonna get the biggest bang for your buck down there. And then if I tear this one down, maybe somebody has an idea to actually use that. And the other day we heard that it was actually the dorm dining, which is one of the largest buildings on the site. It's masonry building. That one really is the one because that was, the inmate housing that was one to get down first. I'm not gonna be able to do that for that $478,000. So next year, something else could come along you should do this instead.
We haven't even had a chance to even market it to anybody that would say that, hey, that building over there bothers me, that building over there bothers me, that building over there bothers me.
We did have one after come forward, I think it was a hemp operation at the time when hemp was big, said, hey, they really like the fence idea because the processing was on the inside would be great. But that didn't happen either. They could make it work. Others, basically, I think others that we've seen in any of the studies is that the site was completely bare, that it's viable. No, we had a number once out there that was well over $1.5 million, I think, to demo all those buildings. We just have a level site.
Are any of those buildings that you would identify that they would want to be torn down, or not that you would want to tear them down, but somebody else would want to have torn down? Are any of them such disrepair that they ought to be torn down at this point in time? Or is it just something that it's a thought process that says, hey, we gotta tear these buildings down?
I think one of them's called the hay barn, that's on the outside of the fence, actually, that in all my years here, I thought really it would have fallen down by now. But barns are barns, they're very good at staying up. Some of the other buildings on the inside are not that great, but it depends on what you're using it for. If you wanted cheap heated storage, well, that very well could be it at a small garage setting.
Well, we're pretty historic here. We don't like tearing down hay barns neither.
They are not historic. The historic preservation has been through and deemed that, it is an old correctional facility farm. A lot of the buildings are not existing. But even talking the other day about this, it was for years we were trying to get rid of the silos. Everybody still likes the silos.
Yeah.
So why tear those down? So where I start may not be where somebody else wants us to start.
And I think that's
true.
the hard part, right, is really
Right.
the focus is on development. And we're not developers at BGS, right, so, how can we make that site more attractive? Or if we are not going to be able to sell it, then what are we gonna do with it? But I think for it to sit there and do nothing is an injustice to Vermonters, Vermont taxpayers. So, you gotta figure it out.
Yeah, so say again, but the 250,000 per year to maintain.
Yeah, so, and Joe can probably speak more to that too, but we heat some of the buildings, for example.
We do heat, and part of that process is that because of the style of facility that it was, a lot of them have sprinkler and fire alarm systems in them. So that's why we heat it, because it's really about, if we're going to mothball it, is that process of really saying that we're shutting these systems off. It could be done, but I think each time we get to the point of we ought to start doing that, somebody has an idea, we go do an assessment, and that year comes and goes, and we're here
Well,
again.
those aren't the buildings you're talking about tearing down.
One or two of them are, they got a couple of unit heaters in there that are blowing, and I could probably isolate those, but again, somebody could come along and say, I want that.
I can tell you my real estate practice, when working with my agents, there's lots of times where I'll say to my agents, listen, You're there to be a help, you're there to help people make decisions on property, but sometimes your opinion doesn't matter. Because what you may like, or maybe what you may not like, isn't what the buyer that you're servicing or trying to help may like. So sometimes it's just best to keep quiet.
Junk versus treasure.
And so sometimes you just don't know what, as you guys have said, you just don't know what some potential buyer's gonna want or what they don't want. So,
For 15 years, we've been trying to take down the silos. And finally, we had historic preservation say they were not historic, you can tear them down, and everybody likes.
And when you say
They are
everybody,
beautiful.
The people that are
The
doing some of the
community.
studies, the community,
yeah,
yes, they're in great condition.
yeah.
Some of them still has a little silage left in them, but it is, the banding on them is still shiny.
Oh, wow.
It is incredible, the condition that they're in, but
Sure.
when it was being operating as a correctional facility, that was deemed a high risk area, having a silo, because being able to climb up inside and the likes of that. So that's why we were looking to take them down. Now, they're plumb, they're square, they aren't going anywhere for years. So they would not be high on my list to take them down right now.
Did you, the level 1 environmental? Have you done that on?
We have not done a level 1 because we own the site, and I would, as is where is, we do know we have this, because of potential demolition, we have done our abatement assessment.
Yeah.
But other than that, we have not done anything else.
Okay.
Scott, did you have your hand raised? Okay. Yes.
I have a question, back to that $200,000+ every year that's being used to heat something. Is it cost effective to take down whatever we're heating so that we don't have to heat anything
Now you're thinking
anymore?
like
Because
Joe Asia
I
does.
don't wanna heat a building that we're gonna tear down.
Now you're
That
thinking
just
like,
doesn't make sense to me.
that's where, so it's funny, Joe and I had this debate back and forth, because Joe thinks like Joe's strategy, which is, what do I wanna knock down to reduce, right, those reoccurring expenses? Where my mind went to, and this is why it's so hard to know, my mind went to, well, what's gonna make the site more attractive to somebody to buy it? And those are two different viewpoints.
I think
So-
9 out of the, I forget how many buildings there are right now, at least 9 of them are heated. And I forget how many are sprinkled, but again, some of it is, it was originally the print shop that became the administration building, sprinkled, fire alarm. So I would have to do something to maintain those unless I work with fire safety to actually say that, we are mothballing these buildings to shut everything off. And that's a point of, you can recover from that. But then, like the dormant dining, that's also the location where I'm providing heat to all the other buildings out of that one, so I don't want to be tearing that one down. So and for the money, the ones I want to tear down, some of them don't have heat at all, so.
How are they being heated?
It's, right now they're on oil. When it was a male correction facility, it was chunk wood that they heated with and offset with some oil. But it is oil.
So it's a conundrum.
Yeah.
Is really the answer.
Money pit.
So money, well, we either need to use it or we need to sell it.
So
Right? Those are one of the, we have to figure it out.
Historically, as far as when you have suggested or BGS has suggested that they've been sold, where did those discussions end? In these committees? As
Yes,
far as
Mr.
in the
Yes,
in the
Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy if you'd like us to go back and provide the years in which we asked to sell it.
I just didn't know if it made it outside these committees and it was the total legislature that did it. So it was the.
House institutions and corrections.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Sounds good. Fair enough.
So, more on that at a different time. So I will jump into other sections where we're with the project manager, that also changed, and so we're gonna jump to section 3, Agency of Human Services.
Yeah.
We managed almost all of their projects. So the one that has changed here and increased by $100,000 was the Northwest State Correctional Facility public expansion planning, design and construction, and I actually was not in the room for this when it was discussed. So I'm gonna look to Kate and Joe.
I can't remember now, they just sort of threw it in there or not, and why we ended up with 100,000.
Maybe Scott knows.
I'm happy to
Sure.
speak to things that I remember. Essentially, there was another one item in the cash. if you remember.
Oh, that's right, okay.
And so this, what the committee decided was to keep the cash and the bond together in one section. So they had reduced the 2.5 million from, the governor recommended Act 69, 2.5 down to 2 million. I'm not sure the reasoning by that, but that's what the things they had done, and then moved in money from the cash and then rounded. So there was like three different things happening.
So the cash fund, I mean, was 600,000 in Act 69, and so they took the cash there.
So maybe that was, my apologies, they didn't round in this one. So there was 600,000 in cash in Act 69, so they moved that 600,000 up. But they also trimmed the 500,000 from bonded. So the effect looks like they added 100,000,
But they really cut.
but they cut it, and
That's what I thought. I thought they cut too, but it's confusing when all that is happening.
that happened another time as well, and they also added an element around it, so.
Was that the only place they could put it? It was a big enough number the way they could punch those numbers around a little bit like that? Is that why it ended up that way?
I think they just wanted to have things all in one, it's easier to read. If it's one line item instead of multiple places and multiple sections, so I don't know that there was anything to do with the amount. Just that they were in the same project, just different line items.
So this is where I go. This is where my mind goes. I go from not pleasant things, but things that cause us beatings on the floor when we go to present it. So if we were sitting here to say, okay, the governor recommended 2.5 million, but now the House changed it to 2.6 million, we're gonna have some easier explanation to be able to go and tell our Senate counterparts why that happened. Maybe it might not come up, maybe it might. So at some point in time, I wanna put an asterisk on this. And I wanna be able to, I don't think that we have to have that decision today. But I want to be able to have an explanation that we can, I'll go back and revisit that. Maybe you good with that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and re-listen to the full report yesterday,
yeah,
but from what I remember, the reporter of this section said that they just added 100,000 and the House floor accepted it and didn't question the elements of moving things in, so if that.
Okay.
If you
and it might very well go that way in the Senate, Scott.
be
but
prepared to understand how.
we need to prepare that there was a lot of moving parts going around and that this was and I want to always be accurate. But I'm wondering if we could have an explanation that in the rounds of moving and combining and doing a lot of different things, this was just one project that had the benefit of getting another $100,000, and it was a project that could absorb the 100,000. Would we be accurate if we said that?
No, actually, so that's all coming back to me.
Okay,
What it is they cut 500,000 out of the bonded money. And there was 600,000 in the governor's recommend of cash. But then they,
for where?
for the same project,
Okay,
and they moved that 600 up to bonded money.
And Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, if you remember this as well, I believe that 600,000 was in FY 24 cash.
okay, so that's why we're not seeing, well,
Yeah, 'cause
no, we
it's
should
not there.
see it. We should see it, that's the confusing
Yes.
part of it, is we're not seeing it
It's-
in FY 24.
Right.
And if you're on the same spreadsheet, it is coming from the line, I just had that.
So this, I think, is line 187 on the spreadsheet report, correct?
Okay, I see that there, okay.
Booking expansion,
Was the.
which is
No,
Or one,
Right.
let me go back, my apologies for, this is.
Yeah, so it's line 189, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's 24 and 189.
So originally we had 2.5, so we had $3.1 million originally for that project between the two of them. And so okay, so $500,000 of that cash disappeared and they had $100,000 left over and they put it into bonded monies into so that project actually got cut by $500,000.
right.
Okay. how does that make that project work for you folks now?
It's a great question because I'm gonna answer and see if I get this right. It's kind of fun. So, we will be, let's Joe gives me her eyeball. We will need more money for this. So basically by reducing this line item, all you're doing is putting more budgetary pressure in future years. But I wanna make sure that that is in keeping with where you'd be,
You
Jeff.
are correct. Right now, we're in the programming phase. So we still have a few more to go to really figure out exactly what we're doing with this project. But it was somewhat banking the money, so, you know, if the stars were all aligned and I had this money coming in July and late fall, January of next year, I was out to bid, I could, you know, that money would be there to start. I don't think that's going to happen, but I'm going to be requesting more money, that money plus next year.
Okay, for my note takers, can we, put that, we're gonna revisit that again, please?
Yeah, because I think just to an average senator, it looks like a gain.
Right.
It does, so
Right.
it's really hard, like, I can totally understand having it all in one place, because it's a little easier to see one number in one location. But I agree with you that it's very hard to follow, because you're gonna have to dig into many columns to work it out.
And I just don't, again, I don't wanna, I understand what the house did, appreciate that, appreciate the historical content of that, but to me, I'd rather be caught telling the truth and having to explain it than, and then, you know, not saying that anything nefarious was done, but I'd rather be saying something factual and having to go back and explain it on third reading than not. So that's where I stand with that. Yeah. Ready, all good with that? Yep. Spend a little bit more time on that one?
Yep.
Okay. Okay,
Okay, so the next one,
It's similar. So if you like the ride you just
okay,
had.
well, let's go on Scott's ride then, because Scott seems to know this probably best of all of us.
Well, you're,
Let's put you on the spot.
No, no, you're fine. This is the same idea, wherein there was a cash line item. And
206 for cash.
so on line 206, you will see that there was.
$562,026.
Correct, and so you won't necessarily find this in the language of the bill. Because that the 562 was governor recommended to add it. And the committee chose not to. Damian didn't put in the language to strike the governor's recommended, just basically have it as if it didn't have. Does that make sense? So you'll see on 206 that the column L. they-
Yeah, you know the same thing I am.
Yes, I am.
Okay,
My calculator.
I couldn't find mine either. So, yeah, so
Yeah, wait.
I'll give you the numbers, 562,026,
56206.
and then,
026.
Oh,
yeah, 562,026.
yeah.
And then, 4.590720.
Am I adding?
Yep,
Say that again, plus?
4590720.
And I think
150. Is that right?
Well, it should
That's
be
the
5 million, it should be 5, yeah, what do you have?
5.1, yeah.
5.1 million?
Yeah.
So did they get back to the same number? So they got back to the same number then?
It looks like it.
Yeah, they moved it out of cash.
Okay.
Oh.
And that was a rounding one.
so. What they did was, if you look at the cash line item, the 562,
Yeah.
they basically took like I think 12,000 off originally, so it's 550 just to make it round. And then moved that 550 up to add it, get to the 5150.
Wow.
So you can argue that they moved it, then rounded it, or they rounded it and moved it. Bottom line, they ended up increasing. The governor recommend by the amount of money. And that money came from cash.
That is gonna be ours.
Yeah.
I'm so happy I don't have to be the one to speak.
Me too.
Okay, so let's mark that
Well, you
one.
just explain to us until we understand it.
Right.
I feel like that is
That's
tough. I
what we're
feel
gonna
like
do.
that's not over there.
That's what we're gonna do, so let's note
Well-
takers, please put a note on that one as well.
Yeah, and just, Mr. Chair, just a question, is this the right amount? this total amount,
Well,
not,
we
not
can
right in
actually-
terms of.
We have BGS here, they can tell us that.
That I
Does
would
this make you guys
prefer to Joe,
whole?
we could follow
Or,
the
or is it what you need for this?
Right, does
Yeah.
this make you whole on that project?
It's good enough because I'm not sure where we're gonna end up with HVAC and correctional facilities. The design. The RFP for design is out on the street right now, so we're looking for designers and we're doing it, in two sections, if you will, not phases. What we're trying to do is get some relief in.
temporary.
So what we're, with that temporary relief is we are looking to try and know what our system is. Put something in that when we do the whole facility, we will be able to connect on that same one, so it's not wasted. So, but like I said, that's out of design right now. I have no idea at the end, best guess on what our estimate is. And so I'm gonna be back next year for some additional funding. I don't think I'll be able to spend all of this by next year's ask. So it's fine.
Okay,
You follow the trail.
so it's gonna be just basically our stuff to be able to explain it correctly,
Yes.
but you guys are whole enough.
But so that was the thing that was gonna happen first. I mean, I remember last year having a conversation about we need relief fast. Is this the fast?
This is part of that, so I'm not putting a system in that in a year and a half and tearing back out and buying it, replacing it. So I'm trying to design it so I can put in a temporary system, but it will be connected to the whole system in the end. So if I can get a cafeteria up and running or a gym or something like that, that's what we're going to do first. So it gives an area of refuge for them to,
Is it gonna be ready by this summer?
that I don't know, it's up to the designers to try and pull this off as fast as they can. That is what is in our RFP, is to make it work. Some of the equipment, and we were just talking to our construction manager here with flood issues. I know it's not apples to apples, but the switchgear that we're looking at to replace at 133 State Street is from the time we order, to the time it arrives, is 72 weeks.
Okay, so that's crazy.
I don't know, again, we're trying to pick systems, so I don't know yet.
Air
The
handling
designer.
units in the peak of the pandemic have been 2
Our-
years from the time you order
Same
to the
thing.
time you get.
This is what I'm having the designer say,
Right.
what can we get in that could work? We-
No, I understand, it's just,
There may be
it was,
something,
I'm having deja vu.
because it's smaller, it may be something that's sitting on the shelf someplace that was manufactured and we grab.
I can help
That's-
with that. So.
And I know actually the excuse I would use if I were you is the floods last year. You were busy with that.
Well, so to be fair, let's go with the Wayback Machine. It's not an excuse. I'm always very.
Well, or
transparent and
reason,
honest,
I
but-
mean, no, I'm not saying it's, no, cause you did have to deal with the flood, I mean, that's a big deal.
So, but to be fair to Joe's shop, so they did run that project like they normally should. The flood did not slow them down.
Oh.
The whole point was, we didn't have enough money to keep going. And so we had to wait to work with DOC to determine if they wanted to request more money in the capital bill, so we could keep moving. Ultimately, they did, right? But then it has to come to you guys and then it has to be supported by the governor, and the governor's recommended, and then it has to go through this law process, not thinking I'm saying it's by law process, to get your approval as well. So the problem is, and we always talk about this with schedules, so this is actually a good thing for us to talk about, is that we get slowed up with money. So if we don't have the money there, which again plays into the request and what we're asking for, then it creates a hold point where we can't move any further because we don't have money. And that's exactly what happened in this particular situation.
So what step did you get to
We did
before you
planning
ran
and
out of
programming.
money?
And we got a rough ballpark cost estimate for both doing temporary and permanent. And then that had to go to DOC, they had to review it, and then based on the numbers that we provided to them, then they had to kind of select, okay, here's where my top priorities are for permanent, here's where I would focus more on temporary. That's, they would love to get all of them up to permanent eventually, but they also have to prioritize because we don't have enough money to do it all.
Okay,
So 2 of the facilities got prioritized for more permanent systems. And the rest got prioritized for more temporary systems. Again, Joe's looking at temporary to eventually pull that into whatever the permanent solution is so that we don't waste money.
I understand, but a temporary turns into like 3 or 4 years to get it.
We're talking millions of dollars to make.
No, I
it
understand,
permanent.
but
It's a
we-
lot of money.
Alright, maybe can you share that, the decision that DOC made?
I think we have a testimony, right?
We do. It was Springfield was first.
But I mean, can you, I mean, there's gotta be some sort of document, right, that where they said. So,
I think it was just, with Al Cormier sitting here laying out what his priorities were. I may have it in an email someplace, but it wasn't well documented by that, looking at the report and giving, providing a lot of information back.
all right, and we don't have to do it, and that's just, I mean, we spent a lot of time and a lot of. I mean, that was very important to us, so it would be good to know how the implementation is happening.
And you also require us to give you monthly updates
That's right.
from,
Oh.
I think, I don't
Yeah,
know.
so what happened with that?
We did them and we did them all on time. And we
Okay.
provided them to the legislature and I don't know that they were read, let me just put it that way, based on working with the two committees. I don't know that anybody read.
That's why we
Certainly,
eliminated a lot of those.
we certainly did the
that's why-
reporting. Kate made sure that we were on time.
Right,
Okay,
so we always, yeah,
right,
that's when we'll go there.
all right, but I would just like to know more, so.
Sure, we're happy to provide more. It's so,
It sounds like that was an important inflection point when,
when we had the
Yes.
planning and programming done, and then we
Yes.
looked at the numbers for both temporary and. permanent,
Yeah, that's really what I-
Prioritizing.
understand.
So for example, Joe, tell me if I'm wrong. The Northwest Correctional Facility, if I'm remembering correctly, was the most expensive one
That is correct.
to fit up for permit.
There was
And it was
upwards
million.
13, 16 million, something like that. Because that was one of those facilities when it was constructed, does not have great attic space to get the larger ductwork into the pipes and stuff like that, so it's gonna take a considerable amount of money to get to, and that was the last location for corrections to go to this presentation we gave. Oh, how nice.
See, Scott helps in so many ways. Thank you,
Good.
Scott.
There was a presentation, my apologies for interrupting, that
No, it's great.
given in HCI that I can share with you, Linda, so you can share, but this just kind of adds HVAC systems. So I just pulled that up so Joe could refresh his memory about the costs.
Yeah, or just forward it to us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's
Absolutely.
wonderful.
thank you.
Springfield was first.
Yes. No, I think I forget now why corrections was saying that was first, but that was their priority.
Because of the population that's there,
Because
it's
of the
because,
medical people.
that's what I was
Although
gonna
they
say.
still have, they do have air conditioning in that
The
area.
medical units everywhere, I believe, have air
Yeah.
conditioning.
Yeah, but they have the biggest
But they-
population, the largest
Yes.
population of medical
Yes.
people.
Right. Right, so that's.
People who need medical care.
Yeah. Springfield is also one of our newest facilities as well, right, or is the newest, I think.
Yeah,
So when we look at it like in Northwest, for example, we've had lots of conversations around what will that facility look like in the future? Right? Plus, it's the most expensive one, fully air conditioned, so, you know, you gotta think about those things in terms of that master plan as well. But happy to provide that information.
thanks.
Here's the good news, Joe put together an RFP, so good news is that we're actually getting that one out earlier than we normally do. Because we've been in a state of we're ready to go, but we need to make sure that we had money. So the next one, just wanna make sure I'm capturing this correctly. We are at DOC statewide correctional facilities, accessibility upgrades. I can speak to this one a little bit and then Joe can jump in, so, DOJ, the Department of Justice came and they inspected 3 different correctional facilities in the state of Vermont for ADA. And of the 3 facilities that they inspected, we were not meeting ADA in all locations. Now, to go back on ADA law, what they say is when you do a major renovation, so we designed it at the time, we designed it for ADA code, right? We then address ADA, whatever evolutions have been made in the code, when we go and we do a major renovation. So if we don't touch a major renovation for a long time, you'll see that we're likely not meeting ADA code anymore. We are still meeting our requirements, just so folks know. It's just that we haven't touched that building in a long time to do a major renovation.
Right.
So DOJ went in, found that we were not meeting current ADA code, because again, we were meeting it when we did we built it or renovated it. And so we were required by the state of Vermont to go in and assess these 3 facilities and bring them all up to ADA compliance. We, DOC had to hire third-party independent architect to go around, and basically do that assessment, and then as we continue to do ADA upgrades, they're going in to check to make sure that we're meeting what the requirements are. So with all of that, we found that we had a funding shortfall, and that's why we're requesting an additional $822,000. Joe?
Very good.
Yay, got it.
That-
What were the
I
three,
actually
just out of
do work with
curiosity?
them pretty quickly.
what were the three facilities?
Chittenden was one.
Yeah.
Newport
Okay, I wouldn't have gotten
and
that.
Springfield.
I did think Springfield.
And I think you showed us, pictures
Yes.
of the restrooms.
But to be clear on that, from what I understand, and maybe it's wrong, the state could have an argument with the government and saying, no, we haven't done that. When we do our when we do something major there, we'll go in and do that, and we'll make it compliant then. I mean,
So the argument or the justification from the Department of Justice is that these people are here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so they believe that that is means to say, you should always in theory be current on ADA code in those types of facilities.
but again, for what it is, my own inflection. You were in violation, but you just decided to go along with it, and that's what you did.
How would you respond to that one, Joe?
I'm not a lawyer, I wasn't in the fight, but I would agree with that. But they said, DOJ said basically, they could not go anywhere on their own, certain things that, they could go to a different restroom or a different area that wasn't in compliance, so because of that, they were saying we had to comply.
But it's the same reason why that we are not, it's part of the reason why we've decided to just do the phase one, or I don't know what phase it was in this building, to do the ADA compliancy. We're not required to do it, because we haven't done any major renovation to it. We just decided that if we're gonna do a state house expansion, that would be the first area that we did. And so that was the low hanging fruit.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. The other thing about this particular building is that at least the original State House where you are today is historic. And it's on the National Register. So that means we cannot actually make alterations to the first version or the first part of the State House. It's the 1859 State House, correct, Joe?
Yeah.
I like to say result, they don't like it, we keep talking about how we,
Correct.
what we call this.
Cause there's the one before
It's
that.
not the one that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
This is actually the third, this is actually the third one.
Yeah, see, and now we have two pictures of it, right?
Yeah.
So how often does DOJ come in and do this? And how often are the codes updated?
Those are questions that I do not know. the answer
I'll go with the code first. The edition we are working off of is 2010. They have not updated it since.
Okay.
There are suggestions out there by them. One of those that we are now actively doing is like EV charging stations. They do, if you put them up on a curb, they do not comply. If you're in a wheelchair, you can't get to it, different heights, stuff like that. So there's suggestions out there that, they should be accessible, not required yet. But some of those we do take into
Okay.
account. Some of the other stuff that has been in place, ramps and the likes of that, bathrooms, we have not adjusted. If we're coming in on renovation, then we do take that into account. The reason why we're doing this is there was a incarcerated individual brought a lawsuit forward.
Oh.
And somehow that, I don't know when the DOJ got involved,
Triggered the,
but they did, and then they came up, did a site visit. And that individual was at the 3 facilities, and that's why we're doing this, at only 3 facilities. They didn't care to see anything else, and we didn't want to show.
Well,
That's
so
not
maybe
true.
we wanna be proactive
Uh,
and not just,
you
Wait
you
for
can
another
be
lawsuit.
proactive, but again, some of that is not gonna be cheap.
oh yeah,
just
no,
say, as long as you got a lot of money.
no, I understand, but if we know it's gonna happen, we'll
Well,
start chipping up. You know, I mean, when you.
we have
do-
enough money we have enough needs elsewhere. So, I hear what you're saying, Senator.
If there's simple, some of the
That is a battle
items,
you're never gonna get at.
So the other way the ADA law reads is that in the case where you're not meeting ADA everywhere, what you're required to do is that somebody that has an ADA need can basically have access to all the same resources everybody else does. So a good example in this building would be if you had somebody on a committee that had an ADA need, well, we don't have to make every single committee room ADA accessible, but we would have to make sure there was a space, one of the rooms here would be used and is large enough to accommodate somebody that has an ADA need. And that's how you would meet
Yeah.
ADA.
Yeah, one at
laws
a time.
today.
reasonable
Good there?
accommodations.
Yeah, we good there for now?
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, so moving on down, so the other one that was added under section 3, we did not ask for it, and it was added in House Institutions and Corrections. was looking at the current Chittenden facility and potentially reusing that site for reentry for men. So here's what I would say, if we play out the timeline, because I do think the timeline in this conversation is important. So we are working, as you all know, on a new women's correctional and reentry facility. That facility will likely take, assuming that we have the cash we need in hand at the time that we need it, right, just talked about that before. It will still take us, I'm gonna say 5 to 8 years, and the reason why it takes so long is, we have to go through a certain amount of design. And then once we have a certain amount of design, then that's when we put it for our permits. This is going to be a very public process. Public permitting processes can take a very long time, especially when you're citing what I like to call an AHS facility. Because there's a lot of people that have concerns around having an AHS facility in their community. And so
Or a lot of people would believe that you shouldn't have one at all.
that's a wild card that we cannot, that we won't know until we start going through that very public process in terms of how long that's gonna take. And then it's gonna take you a couple of years to build it. So that's why I say 5 to 8 years. A lot of that though is hung around the permitting piece.
What's the very, say, they say, yeah, come on into our community. What's the earliest?
Even if they said, yeah, come into our community, I think you're looking at 5 years.
Probably, I mean, this is not a small facility, so the design in and of itself is gonna take a considerable amount of time. Year and a half, perhaps, in and of itself, if not two, because at each phase of design, there's gonna be a review, there's a lot of drawings. I mean, I expect that this will be, the drawing sheet will be well over 300, 400 sheets. And so to do that review process, you're not doing it in a typical week. There's 2 weeks that we would do for a review with 10 to 50 sheets. So it'll be months to review this and go on to the next phase, and then, you know.
A year and a half for design?
And
Minimal.
what you should add to that is there's also specification writing that goes along. So in addition to having a piece of paper that shows the layout, you then need to have all of the specifications that say, this is the type of metal you'll use, this is the type of concrete you'll use, this is the type of color you'll use, it's very, very prescriptive. And so I'll just tell you, when I came in and I looked at the Vermont Agricultural Environmental Lab, another big bill that we had, this one will be bigger. You had a stack of plans that were this thick, and you had a stack of specifications that was this thick. So
Right.
it is very time consuming, it is very detail oriented, and it takes time.
No, I understand that. I've just seen buildings get designed quicker than that.
This is a correctional facility.
Oh, yeah,
This is
I've
a-
seen
This is a
it,
specialty facility. It is very complex. The hard part, I think, the hardest part for BGS, just to be totally honest, is that most people are used to their homes, or most people are used to talking to their developers. We have a lot more requirements because we're the state of
No,
Vermont than
yeah, I
other
understand.
commercial developers do, and most of the complicated systems you never see, right? Because they're all the mechanical and electrical and plumbing systems.
Sure.
These buildings have a brain, they really do. They have digital direct controls that control your entire building. So in Essex, for example, when you walk in, very beautiful facility on the outside, and it's very residential, very pretty. But all of the complicated systems that you don't see are in the attic, and that's where all the money is. That's 40% of the cost of that build was in all of the building systems. But it also means it takes time, right, to design all of those complex systems into the building itself. So it does take time. And to be fair, the other thing that's really tough about all this is I worked at V-Trans, I was a project manager. I know how long it takes to deliver bridge projects. Those are far less complicated than building projects, and we go faster at PGS than they do at V-Trans.
Mhm.
That's not picking, that's just telling you my experience at V-Trans
Yeah, no,
versus my
I'm
experience
familiar
at
with
PGS.
this.
So 5 years is probably,
Probably, I mean,
well, then you got construction time.
and that is
But he's rolling that in.
in that 5 years, but anything you're looking at, you know, it's time, cost, quality.
Yeah.
When we expedited by going through a design build process down in Springfield for the correctional facility there, I think I've been there every day, not every day, sorry, every year, doing something, renovation and spending money in that facility because of the speed we put that up there.
Mm,
So all the joints that, in between the precast panels were all, had to be redone. I've redone all the steam lines down there, put in a whole new vault because they thrusted out. They were not installed properly. The contractor who had done this, it was also a cogen facility. Don't worry, we'll be here, we'll run it. They went belly up. And I replaced the whole electrical system down there, back in 2010, 2011, I believe, the whole incoming service because of that. So those are one of the
That was
things
design build, yeah,
where,
design build is,
but that's how you get it done
Yeah,
faster, but
right.
then it's one of those things where, yes, they can produce the documents faster and they can leave things up to the contractor to help out. But part of that is we don't necessarily get what we want.
mhm,
We have, like, some of our specifications that we require is something you wouldn't think of, but in a ball valve. We want a stainless steel stem, because we found over the years, they've actually failed with bronze or anything else. So those are one of those things where you have to go through, and when you're reading line by line, all those specifications, you're looking for some of that detail. And so it does take time.
yeah,
But some of that you can hope that they've captured and go with it, and we find out later.
So back to this 200,000.
So back to the 200,000. So the reason I was trying to play out that timeline for you.
Which we're fine with that,
Is-
because I think that a lot of that information was helpful, but I think we have discussed this. And I think, the committee had, some reservations about whether we would spend $200,000. And how many more times that would be spent before we actually would have a need, because the information that we gathered on this $200,000 is gonna be pretty old, and it's gonna have to be done probably 2 or 3 more times.
So that's what I was gonna say, Mr. Chairman, is that, the reason I was giving the timeline of 5 to 8 years is because that's how long it's gonna take for us to move the women over. Right? And so that means that site isn't vacant for 5 to 8 years. So if we do planning programming today, and we've been talking a lot about advances, right, in these types of facilities. My concern is we will have to rework that in the future when the time comes. There's no doubt, and we very
No
much
hurry to spend
support.
this $200,000 to go. find
There's
that
no
out.
doubt, and we 110% support the fact that men need a reentry system as
Yeah,
well.
I do as well.
But the challenge is that, and we do think that South Burlington could be a great site as well, because it is located in a downtown facility. And according to Chair Emmons, they used to go out and work during the day when the men were there, so kind of fascinating how things come full circle. But what I was gonna say is my concern would be, to your point, Mr. Chairman, that we would have to go back and do planning and programming again, because design principles will likely continue to modernize over
And,
time.
and even if, yes, and even if it was next year, it'd be a whole different capital bill, and that's when we could do it then. But not in this capital bill. I think that probably we're gonna find a home for this $200,000 elsewhere within the bill. We'll discuss that furthermore as a committee, but, I just wanna make sure that that doesn't bother DGS, as if that's what we do.
It took not, this money, how I would spend the money would be, I would first be looking at the fact of taking the 2-year-old report from HOK and really working with Department of Corrections right off is how many men are you looking at to be in this facility? And I know with the women, that has been kicked around substantially as to where we finally have ended up right now. Even then, it's somewhat questionable, and we're looking at an expansion, just in case there will be more women who'll be able to go into that part of the facility. So that'd be one of my concerns is I could look at it and say, okay, it's gonna be, like HOK said, 150 is actually gonna be the number in 10 years, 15 years when that facility is actually constructed. So
Because
we will
policy
ask
and law may
for it.
change.
We will ask for it when that need is there. So if the facility looks like the women are gonna be vacated within 5 years, year 3, 4 is when we'd be doing that study to know exactly what we're gonna build, and then additional funding to do the design for whatever we're going to construct.
Fair enough. Makes sense. Makes sense, committee? Yeah. So we'll revisit that and maybe put a note on there that. Yep. We can, maybe use that elsewhere.
And then we don't have anything, correct, Joe, in section 4? So that's EP. I don't think we do, but I just want to double check. And then,
Section 15,
yeah, I think we're way down, aren't we?
15A. Yes, 15.
Maybe, but that stays the same, so we'll do that.
That states that.
Yep,
But
yep.
that was an additional 1.5.
We're down now?
Added.
Nothing changed.
Okay.
I'm just trying to make sure that Joe and I are on the same page about where we have projects.
Okay.
Is it Department of Labor, is that you?
Yes, we're constructing for the park department. of Labor.
Yes, we are. Oh, there you are, 124.
Got it. So we are requesting additional information or additional money, for the VDOL project, which is Department of Labor. They have a building over here. You can see it when you come off the interstate. And that building, I think, was built in the 1960s, Joe.
They were to the sixties.
And the major building systems have never been replaced. So they
The
are
original.
well over end of life. And so they brought forward a project for consideration a couple of years ago, supported by the administration and the legislature to upgrade their building systems. And we are requesting additional funding because we need it, correct, Chuck?
We did for the electrical system that was part of it. Tay Southworth, my mechanical engineer, structured it so that we are replacing the chiller system and the boilers. And so it was structured that if we didn't have enough funding, that the electrical system could be done at a later date. Well, we're at that later date now. He does have the funding. This summer, we'll be putting in, spring, we may get to the chiller to be installed, and then in the summer, we'll be doing the boilers, and the electrical system will be done after that. And that's taking out the original transformers that are located inside the building, probably have PCBs in them, and if they did blow, then there would be contamination shown inside, so we're taking them outside so that it's transformers a lot safer on the outside of the building than the inside. So,
And that was committee agreed.
yes, they did.
And that is, this 1.5 is for actual work and not design. This
That
is
is
actual-
correct.
Okay.
And how did you do this one so fast?
Oh, it's been on there for a while.
Yes, this is the third final phase, if you will, if you take
Okay,
chiller,
we just did it,
boilers.
cause to me it's new,
So
'cause we didn't have it
we
last
thought we
year.
had enough money, which is why we didn't request any
So you
more.
had the design and all the,
Had designed it out,
right,
So cost over, basically, that's what it is.
Cost overrun,
Okay.
that's what it is. Yes.
oh, okay. Alright,
And is there any supply chain problem, or can we actually expect this will happen?
tough,
Do we have the parts?
for the electrical, we're not, the switchgear, I believe, is going to be relatively easy to get hold of because we're going outside. We are trying to actually place the transformers so Green Mountain Power owns them instead of us. If not, it's still very similar. Transformer that is easy to get as opposed to put their doors or.
So, then we get, then it's got, and then this is where it gets way over my head. Okay, so we start,
Reallocation.
they're moving the money around.
yeah.
What do you guys think? Do you wanna power through or you wanna call it good?
Call it good.
Or, yeah, can we do it another day?
Yeah, we're gonna do it another day.
Sounds good,
Yeah, if you guys good with that?
Yeah.
We're tired.
We got enough to chew on for a little bit and,
Well, this is like speaking of foreign.
well, it is gonna be in a foreign language and I wanna be fresh on that, so we get started today as far as on that. You guys good with that?
Yes,
Okay.
great idea, Mr. Chair.
Well,
Chair.
Yeah.
Well, I will about that, but anyways, so, unless there is. If BGS and everybody in the room is good with that, I think we're gonna call it a day.
Oh,